Great. Hello, everyone. We are back for another important conversation in the midst of what's happening in the community around COVID and all the uncertainty that this is causing. We are here today with Shawn Brown, who runs BAM, Becoming a Man. And I'm really excited that we're going to have a conversation about our youth in Boston, what we should be thinking about, how they are feeling with all the changes that are happening, and then bigger picture from that. So, Shawn, can you just tell us, what's your background? How'd you get involved with BAM, and what should we know about the organization?
Absolutely. First, I just want to thank off by thanking you, Councilwoman Wu, for providing folks like myself and other members from the community the platform to discuss, how this COVID pandemic has not only impacted us personally in our work, but how it has impacted our community and the
Mm-hmm.
young people that we serve. This is therapeutic on so many levels,
Mm.
and I can only hope that people are tuning in to hear from the amazing people that you've had on the live and that you will continue to have. There's so much to learn during this unprecedented time. So first, I want to thank you,
No, thank you.
for that opportunity. And in terms of myself, I'm a lifelong resident of the city of Boston. I grew up in Dorchester. I'm proud to say that I'm a product of the Boston public school system, graduated from Charlestown High School. I was raised in a single parent home household where I was the oldest of four boys, had no father figure. Um, not having a father figure in my life, I grew up idolizing the wrong male figures as role models, which eventually led me to being involved in a lot of negativity that society has to offer a young man without, proper guidance. Fortunately for me, I had some mentors who came into my life and believed in me when I didn't believe in myself at the time. They gave me an opportunity when I gave, when people gave up on me and told me that I wouldn't be anything.
Mm.
Um, one of my mentors, Thaddeus Miles, always says, "Our young people don't need saviors; they need believers," and that rang true with me. It was having, those one or two mentors like an Ed Powell, Al McLean, that made a difference in my life by simply believing in me,
Mm.
which allowed me to sit here today as an executive director of a national evidence-based program like Becoming a Man. I truly know the power that happens between a caring adult and a young person. So for me, it's about paying it forward. And who's the next Shawn Brown? So that's just, a personal, testimony of myself in terms of work-wise. Prior to BAM, I was running my own nonprofit youth development mentoring organization for young men of color that I founded out of college called Diamond Educators Mentoring under Justice Resource Institute, JRI. And before that, I worked for the Boston Private Industry Council for 15 years as a senior career specialist for alternative ed. Um, so the work wise, transition into how I got to BAM, and a little bit about BAM. If the founder Tony D Vittorio, we call him the BAM father, was sitting here, he would say BAM is simple yet complex.
Mm.
BAM blends three different modalities: clinical theory and practice, rites of passage, and a dynamic approach to youth engagement. Youth Guidance is Becoming a Man program is an evidence-based, school-based counseling program that guides young men to learn, internalize, and practice social cognitive skills. Which in turn, also helping them make responsible decisions for their future and become positive members in their schools and in their community. BAM is a social emotional learning program that uses cognitive behavioral therapy counseling approach with our scholars. We serve young men grades 7 through 12 and in the Boston and Cambridge public school system. We're currently serving more than 8,000 young men across the country in the following cities: Chicago, the birthplace; Boston, the
Mm-hmm.
first expansion city; Seattle and LA. And most recently, our expansion has been internationally to London. So,
Oh, wow.
um, the program is really, is really growing. So, um, that's a quick, overview of who I am, how I got
That's great.
here and what BAM is.
So tell us, before COVID, before the school shut down, how many young men were you working with in the Boston Public Schools, and what did that look like? I mean, I've seen some
Yeah.
of the rooms and the spaces. I was this close to joining a circle before everything got canceled in this new
I
world.
know.
Um, but what kind of just walk us through day to day for these young men. What did it mean to be part of BAM?
Um, yes, first, we're definitely, when this all passes, is looking forward to having you. Can you hear me?
Yep,
Can you hear me?
yep, I can hear you.
Okay, I can hear you. So definitely saying, we're looking forward to having you in the BAM circle, once it's passed. I know we talked about it. Um, but, prior to this, we were serving 580 scholars in the Boston Public Schools. Our target goal was to serve 550
Wow.
across the 9 schools, um, 9 Boston Public Schools, and 1 school in Cambridge. Cambridge Regional Latin is also a school
Hmm.
that we're in. So in total, serving 580 scholars. We refer to our young men as kings and scholars. So you'll hear me refer to our young people a lot as such. So that was the number, and things were going well. Things were going well. The engagement, we were doing a lot of building community things. Gaining, building social equity in the community for our scholars, just to see themselves in different spaces, in different lights. So a lot of that was happening during before the crisis, the COVID-19.
And so, how are you in touch with them now? Are you doing virtual circles? What have you had to kind of shift to now that the schools and the physical spaces are closed?
So what we're doing now is, we've moved to virtual meetings and Zoom sessions with our scholars. The foundation of BAM, first is creating a fun and safe, challenging and respectful experience and environment for our scholars. So during this time, we're leaning on that value heavily. It's important to reestablish um, the trust between our scholars during this time. So we're creating a safe space and acknowledging, that these are tough times for our scholars. Um, the work we are requiring them to do, this is work that we're requiring them to do, requires them to be vulnerable.
Mm,
So we're asking them to be comfortable, during doing this work virtually, and showing um, showing some patience, showing some patience. This is all new to them. It's new to the adults. It's new to them. So again, it's about reestablishing that safe container
yeah.
for our that young people. Um,
And what are you hearing from your scholars now? I mean, what are the things that they're bringing to you that are specifically from this COVID situation and physical distancing and not having these kind of spaces both in school and outside school? What are the issues that they're elevating to you?
Young people, our scholars are having a range of emotions right now, from being scared, sad, anxious, all stemming from the fear of the unknown. This
Hmm.
is unprecedented times for us all, and as adults are struggling with grasping what's happening, um, and the new norm. You can only imagine the impact it's having on our scholars and the young people in general. The expectation is that they'll be able to adapt. While that's true, it's not going to happen in the first week or even in
Yeah.
the second week. So what's our responsibility? What's
Hmm.
our responsibility in that? In that case, the first thing we can do is listen. And
Hmm.
I'm going to really reemphasize, the listening piece, listening to, what it is that they're feeling, instead of dictating what needs to be done. We talk about youth voice being important.
Yep.
It's more important now than ever.
Yep.
We're engaging, we're navigating what works for them. And what I mean by that, what time of the day, all these things are
Hmm.
important when designing a program. We can design these programs, but if it doesn't have, or these innovative strategies, if it doesn't have youth voice and youth engagement, then it can all be for nothing. Because
Hmm.
are we factoring in the technology piece? Are we factoring in um, all the other um, factors that come into play? So what we've been doing, that's what we've been doing with our scholars, is really providing them, going back to the foundation, that safe space.
Hmm.
So when our check-ins, um, we have a curriculum that we follow, which is 32 lessons over 2 years, built around our 6 core values: accountability, integrity, accountability, self-determination, positive anger expression, respectful womanhood, and visionary goal settings.
Hmm.
And at some point, we talk to our counselors about sometimes you got to put the curriculum to a side and deal with
Yeah.
things in immediate. And for us, that's what we've done. We've put the curriculum to a side, and right now it's about the importance of listening to our young people and hearing them. So that's what we've been doing and has been a strategy.
So speaking of listening to our young people and voices from your kings and scholars, shout out to a couple of them who are commenting on the Facebook. They're
Hey,
tuned in here. So I see
my
Rico,
gosh,
Johnny, a few of your BAM scholars from Madison Park
awesome,
checking in.
awesome,
So I want
awesome.
to I want to make a note to any BAM scholars who might be watching. If you have issues that you want us to flag during this live podcast, we got another 20 minutes or so to go. Feel free to put in the comments and I'll bring it up as we're talking with Mr. Brown here because we want to lift up the issues that you have. So ask any questions and I have them scrolling on the side over here. We'll bring them into the conversation.
Wow, wow, that that made my
Yeah,
day,
they got you. They're
to
watching. So
and that speaks to, I'm sorry, but that speaks to the work that the counselors are doing,
yeah,
with our scholars, knowing, so we have our meetings and the relationships they have. So to have the scholars in tune, definitely want to, um, just affirm, my team. And when I say team, meaning leadership, supervisors, and counselors for the amazing work that they have been doing. So, that's a credit to them. So
yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
absolutely, absolutely. So just thinking about bigger policy issues, we talked a little bit about the uncertainty and the stress that that causes all around for young people, for people in the school community and communities at large. What other issues, once we get past the uncertainty a little bit, there's still going to be a lot that was lost in this period, right? In terms of academics, in terms of social connections, in terms of work opportunities, a lot of businesses are shut down. What should we be thinking about on behalf of young people now? As the weather gets warmer, as folks are still not in school, how do we start to keep people engaged for when we might be able to lift some of these social distancing, physical distancing restrictions?
Um, so I want to respond to that in two ways. The first is continue the amazing work that has been happening this far. Um, our district partners have been amazing in terms of engaging, BAM and other community partners, in the know. So there's, I've been part of the equity roundtable discussion with
Mm-hmm.
the district where they've brought in community partners to talk about what's going on. How can they be supportive? So things like that. I've heard from all my advisory council members and board members who have checked in about what's needed. What how can we be supportive? What do you need from us? So I think to continue to do that work, which I know is happening
Yeah.
across the country. So really a all hands on deck approach. But when you talk about the impact scholars wise, I want to mention the mental health piece,
Mm-hmm.
for our scholars because that's important. It's one thing for scholars to be away from their friends physically, but it's another thing for them to be away for them mentally. Many of our
Yeah.
youth we serve are already disconnected, so this serves as a challenge for them. We want to be mindful of of that. How do we support them? Um, in that space is going to have huge ramifications in what happens in the future. We recognize that sometimes, home isn't a safe space for our
Yeah.
scholars. Let's be real around that.
Yeah.
So, for those scholars to be isolated at home, it's challenging. We want to be intentional in making sure that we're supporting both the scholar and the parents in that instance. So, that's important. Community plays a role, and that partners play a role in that.
Yep.
If you have these relationships, but being away from school, not to play sports, go to the mall, or will have a huge impact on the mental health and psyche of our scholars. These are places where young people socialize. You take that away from them, and that puts them in a dark place. And that's some of
Mm-hmm.
the stuff that we've been hearing from our scholars. Our scholars are not afraid to be vulnerable and talk about the fear that they have, the sadness, the shame, the anger. So again, it's important. It's important while we may not be able to connect with our scholars in person. Continue, and I say we're being innovative in using the platforms that they're familiar with to communicate. Whether that's the Facebook, that's the Zoom sessions, but taking that in consideration, um, and what they have, what technologies they do have, what is accessible for them. So
Yep.
I've been fortunate enough to be on phone with board members who the district is doing a great job in making sure that scholars have chromes and hotspots, but that same conversation is being had with partners. And my board, I was on a few phone calls this morning with a few of my board members who are really um, engaged in thinking, as you said, about you know the future. How do we continue to support them? What are the needs? We want to remove all obstacles and barriers for our scholars during this time, which is important.
Yeah,
And
and
then
I
I'll
guess.
just
Oh yeah, go
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 ahead.
ahead, go ahead, Sean.
No, I was just going to say, and then just an example of the mental health impact,
Yeah.
I was going to provide was, a lot of our young people, um, a lot of people think about the physical things, so we're hearing scholars sharing about someone they know, and not thinking about the emotional. We're hearing scholars talk
Mm.
about, someone they know, or a family member who has contracted the virus. And
Yeah.
these are emotional challenges that come up, with this. So, that's where the fear, the anxiety, the anger, and the shame is coming in. Scholars, in some cases, if they didn't have BAM counselors, wouldn't talk about this, and that's where the shame comes from, and things like that. So being able to just to put it, our scholars are scared. I'm going to be, frank, and need an outlet to talk about these things, during this time. And that's what BAM is providing, a safe space for our scholars to, have those real conversations, show vulnerability
Yeah.
without the fear of being judged.
Yeah, which is why I think the program is so important, because in empowering your scholars to kind of sit with that fear or vulnerability, and then provide a platform for their peers to also engage on that level, you're really kind of releasing folks to reach their full potential. And I just want to add, so we got more check-ins here. So scholars from East Boston checking in,
Hey, go
Juan
Jets.
Camilo. We have a counselor from English High School here. So everyone that's tuned in and watching, and to you, Mr. Brown, I mean, I would just ask, if you all, your kings and scholars, could be ambassadors back to the city as well, you know, because we're so disconnected and people aren't coming in to see their teachers and their counselors and folks at school, we really are relying on young people to now be the kind of know the leadership out in the community and report back to us.
Hmm.
Where are you seeing food access issues where people might be going hungry now because we're not getting that direct those meals at school? How is our meal pickup and drop off program going? On the mental health side, on the safe spaces side, what could we be doing better? Where is there need? It would make a huge difference if your scholars and your counselors and you all can kind of be those eyes and ears and let us know along the way where we could be providing more support.
Absolutely. I mean, you raise a great point. That is the work. So when we also hear from our scholars, what we are hearing, stories of scholars stepping up to the plate and using this opportunity to be leaders, amongst their peers. They've created their own support peer group sessions. With their peers. BAM scholar counselors, have talked about um, our core value of accountability, responsibility, and integrity, and you see these young kings embodying that when they're taking these leadership roles. So they are, if they hear of opportunities for resources, things like that, are sharing with their counselors. So
Yeah.
it's not only a case of counselors are coming in saying here's the sports, but again, that goes back to the listening piece and
Mm-hmm.
and hearing from our scholars. So the scholars talk about how the BAM core value has helped them cope and support their families during this time. One of the core values in particular that comes up a lot of time with our scholars is the self-determination,
Yeah.
being able to, pursue my goals in the face of adversity, positive thought replacement. So to hear that coming from the scholars is,
Mm.
it's just like, it's wow, it really speaks to the work, that again, that the counselors are doing and the team is doing, when you have scholars internalizing those core values, and using that to support their families, to support their community. So
Hmm.
absolutely agree 100%. That is the end goal. The end goal is for them to become the ambassadors, of the program, co-facilitate sessions with their BAM counselors. And ultimately for me, I long for the day where, I hire our first BAM counselor, our first BAM scholar as a counselor,
Yeah.
if that's the path that they want to go. So, it's all about paying it forward. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so can you share any examples of what you're hearing from your scholars on ways that they're kind of creatively um, trying to keep community going? We've heard about Instagram dance parties and
Hmm.
other, you can't be in the same room, but what are young
Right.
people doing to kind of keep those bonds strong?
Listen, our young people are have some of the brightest minds and some of the brightest people in the world, and the things that they're coming up with. One of the things they're definitely using is all the platforms to, the gaming is a huge piece. Don't underestimate, that piece of, them creating, um, opportunities to, to play video games, but also still in that incorporating the BAM core values. And I tie that back to one of our partners, um, in Microsoft, and having an opportunity for our scholars to go and use gaming as a way to teach life lessons. So from that, they learn, now they're applying
Mm.
during this time, still using it. So, whether they're innovative, they're coming up with a lot, but gaming has been one that
Hmm.
we definitely have. You see the online, parties and dance, creating those different types of, opportunities for young people to stay engaged, and stay sane.
And so, what do you hope they get out of all this? We're now in um, week two of schools being closed. We are, you know, not sure when everything will go back to quote unquote normal again, if there will be a normal after this.
Right.
People are worried about their families, and so as they're thinking, particularly for your scholars who are kind of on the brink of transitioning out of Boston Public Schools and looking at next steps, what do you hope that they will get out of this experience, and where will we be after we're no longer talking about COVID nonstop, but how will this have changed us in a way that's positive?
Believe it or not, I think, you see a lot on the media in terms of young people not taking this serious.
Mm.
I haven't found that to really be the case, in the conversations that, I've had with young people, and the
Yeah.
conversations that I've had with my staff. I think, like I said, they're scared, so they are taking it serious. They're educating themselves. I believe that this is going to, um, really, um, help our scholars, as they, as they move forward and look into, um, what the, um, what the future holds for them. So really taking it serious. I think academically, like we've had conversations around scholars being concerned about, their grades, because,
Right.
maybe they weren't performing well in school. Now that you're not, scholars are concerned about, failing. Am I going to,
Hmm.
fail? Am I not going to pass? So, in that sense, scholars, we talk about and we use that as an opportunity, a teaching moment. Okay, so, how, what's the impact? What's the impact of you not doing what you needed to do? One of the
Hmm.
things we do is academic integrity check-ins with our scholars. We have real conversations around your grades and where you are. So that's, again, we tie that into the current situation, and let's have that conversation around academic integrity.
Yep.
You're concerned about that. So what's the impact? What are you going to do moving forward when we get back? When things are back to normal, what's going to be the impact? So
Yep.
we start to talk about that visionary goal settings, core value for BAM, in terms of, let's revisit that, let's
Yep.
set goals. So I think we're going to come out of this with, scholars who are, just eager to, um, to get on with their life and do the right thing and be leaders, and be, those champions and ambassadors that you talked about that we want them to be.
Yeah.
They definitely have been educated, throughout this process. And we're seeing it, we're seeing leaders step up to the plate. So, I'm really, um, just looking forward to, um, the future and what this holds for our scholars.
Yeah. Okay. So as we wrap up here, one comment and one question from the folks who are watching. Mr. Hall says, Joshua, as an example, we're asking about how people are adjusting in this new time. He says English scholars are holding each other accountable using Instagram to do push-ups. So they have a C50 and do 50 push-up challenge. That's incredible. Kind of supporting each other, making sure that you're taking care of mind, body, and spirit. And then there was one question that I think is really important. So Malachi has asked, this is so great that BAM is supporting your scholars, your kings. What about the youth who aren't involved with youth organizations right now? What do you think the city or your scholars could be doing to make sure that people who aren't, lucky to be in that group of 580 scholars, what about the youth as a whole?
So that's a great question. At BAM, we might have a targeted, number of scholars we serve, but our approach is we're embedded in the culture of the school. So we've built equity in the school where we have relationships with scholars outside of, outside of BAM. When I look at our data, we have been in contact with 532 of our scholars. Out of the 580 that we're serving. We've held 30 Zoom sessions. Of that 532, 253 scholars have been engaged in those Zoom conversations. So, today, looking at the running total, I believe we've had over 1,000 connections with BAM, with scholars, not only just BAM scholars, with BPS. So, that's what we're also hearing from our scholars, friends who are going through some things. Counselors have relationships with other students. So we're supporting them in that way. So we're really relying on, it goes back to the listening piece of our scholars, who in your family, your friends need support, and how can we support them? And that speaks to how, when I talked about our scholars being really innovative in creating their own peer group sessions, that's, what I was referring to. So we're absolutely here to support, all young people, whether they're in BAM or not. We believe in what we do. We believe in that we do something well, and we stay in our lane with it. So we also believe that, we're not the end all be all. So we believe if things don't fall in our wheelhouse, partnerships and collaboration is important.
Yeah.
So we're intentional in collaborating with like-minded organizations and individuals who are doing great work. So for us, the partnership is key. In terms of working with our partners who need support. How can BAM support you and the young people that you're serving? So that's the importance of these equity roundtable discussions that the district is holding, the partnerships that we have with the community. So the district has done a great job, again, providing that platform for partners to, one, to know who's in the room, and connect with each other. So I think more of that to continue to happen.
Perfect. And maybe we'll follow up to get some of those resources and partners from you that we can share back out. Folks who are watching really want to make sure that young people who are not, who might be disconnected from school or 18 to 21 have opportunities and support in this time as well. We got one message that scholars have voiced a concern around resources such as laptops, and wishing that the laptops had been offered before the virus. There's now, I think part of what we're seeing now is that we're doing all these things that previously we thought maybe weren't possible or we didn't do, such as giving access to city meetings online, and so you don't have to come down to City Hall during the workday. These are all things that we could have done before, and now we've kind of been forced to do. But the good news is that now, when we do get back to more normal times, we can keep some of these access points open to engage more people than ever before, and that's the hope. And shout out also sad, as you mentioned. Mr. Thaddeus Miles, the mentor's mentor, has been watching as well and wanted to. He sends love and respect to you, and we send it right back to him because I know how much he does out in the community as well. So,
Awesome.
any final thoughts, Shawn?
Yes, my final thoughts, and I'm glad you asked that, would be to, and this is just everyone, just take care of yourselves. At BAM, we talk about the parallel process, and what it basically, what we'd say is, basically we don't ask of anything of our young people that we're not willing to do ourselves.
Yeah.
So with that said, we have 3 daily check-ins for our staff to check in on their well-being. We provide the same safe container that we provide for our scholars, we provide for our staff. So the 3 check-ins start with, early morning good energy check-in, just a one-word check-in, with feelings, how are you feeling? Then there's a midday check-in, and that check-in is about, what has your day been like so far with scholars, as well as what supports do you need, personally. And then we end the day with a final good energy checkout, recapping the day, a one-word checkout around feelings. And then we just end it with a reminder about self-care, disconnect, allow time, for your family and to work on yourself. So I'll definitely, encourage that's important. That happens 5 days a week for us, making sure that, we want to be mindful of, some of the things that happen transferring to, counselors and things of that nature. So it's important to take care of self. So wanted to highlight that piece. And then, the final piece of advice would be continue to work together and share best practices. That's something that BAM is committed to. I talked about, it takes a village to do this work, to have real impact. My belief is no one organization can do this alone. No one organization is touching these young people 24 hours a day. So it's incumbent upon us to work together and support our young people, so they're not falling between the cracks and and ending up in the system. So I'll leave it there, and then just closing, again thanking you, Councilwoman Wu, for your exemplary leadership in creating this amazing platform to stay connected and feel supported. As I mentioned earlier, this is therapeutic. At BAM, our work is done in circles, and we talk about, when one man does his work, another man does his, is doing his, and that applies here. When one organization or individual is sharing, it's having an impact on the masses, and there's someone who can relate or feeling connected to this conversation, and has helped them deal with their stuff. So thank you, and I appreciate you, and I'll continue to be that leader, and look
Thank you
forward
so
to
much.
hosting you in the BAM circle.
Yeah, I've been so nourished by this conversation, and we'll continue to lift up what you've said. Taking care, self-care, taking care of community, and thinking about all the ways in which we are standing up and being ambassadors and support for others around us. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. We had audience members from Madison Park, East Boston, English,
Awesome.
and all the way from BAM Chicago as well. So thanks, Shawn.
Beautiful.
We'll talk to you soon,
thank you.
and keep me updated.
Have a great one. Be blessed.
You too. Bye.